Hey everyone, Clumsy Fumble here. Let's talk about Doom by Fate. This game will probably not be a regular on my channel, but I do want to at least talk about it once and keep my fingers on the pulse of it and its future. And if I do end up liking something enough in the future, I'll talk about it. Today, I just want to give you my thoughts on the game, what I do like as well as what I don't like, and give some constructive feedback on this game. I'll probably slowly work my way around through many other games in the asymmetrical space in an attempt to just find more games to regularly talk about. I hate to ask this at the start of the video, but if you like the video, like, subscribe, blah blah. Okay, review time. First, I want to talk about what the actual goal and vision of this game is, because I'm having a hard time discerning what that actually is. It's pretty clear this game takes a lot of inspiration from Forsaken, but everything is notably looser, faster, and all the more bombastic. It's an asym horror game with the bombastic flair of a Battlegrounds game. Where this game isn't taking inspiration from Forsaken, it's taking inspiration from LIMBUS Company, which is primarily through the UI and a few character designs. This game is also full of other anime or anime adjacent things as well. It's really hard to tell how serious this game is actually meant to be taken. The lobby, while cozy, is pretty unserious. It's full of Limbus, Toho, and other various memes, or popular IPs and such. As for the maps, they're all just kinda okay, I guess. Some feel ridiculously small, while others feel needlessly gigantic. One map is also very clearly based on the Library of Ruina, which is a pretty shocking thing to see as I'm not used to Roblox developers knowing what that game is. The fandom wiki states it as Hosflor, which I do see the resemblance to, but it also just resembles the more generic areas of the library as well that you see throughout the game. And to top it all off, Captain Rampage is quite literally just meant to be lay-hang without being lay-hang. When it comes to gameplay, the game moves very fast, and everything feels extremely punchy, from loud sounds to screen shakes to overwhelmingly flashy visuals and really big hitboxes. Characters run very fast, and everything has speed and impact to it. While the audio design and choices for sound in this game are very fun and video gamey, the actual audio direction in this game is quite poor. Everything sounds a lot closer than it actually is, and you can hear pretty much anything happening from anywhere on the map. It makes the game feel, again, a lot more action than horror, which isn't a bad thing at all. From a gameplay perspective, this is your usual structure of an asymmetrical horror game, but in terms of themes and vibes, it's pretty far from horror. On that note, this game doesn't seem to have any sort of thematic, emotional, or genre through line attached to it. This game just feels like a collection of references to things that the developers like. And while there's nothing necessarily wrong with that, it makes me unwilling to get as invested as I can in other games and their energies because I just don't know what to latch onto. This game has very little uniqueness in its identity and feels very derivative on so many different fronts. I have no idea how important their lore actually is supposed to be to the game itself, or if they're just doing it under the assumption that they should do it, because it has been popular in other games before this. Even then, they're not doing too much unique with it yet outside of Cool Kids lore specifically, and even then it reads like it was written by an 8-year-old, despite the concept actually being pretty cool. Characters in this game don't even have names, they just have roles, titles. Skins don't alter that character or give them any sort of unique flair, they transform them into different characters entirely most of the time, and almost all those things are references to things outside of Doom by Fate's own identity. This lack of identity also affects the music in this game, as outside two major chase themes which I think are exceptional, a lot of the other music in this game blends together to me, and I have trouble remembering how those songs go or who they're meant to be for. The Cool Kids soundtrack is genuinely great, but I can't help but feel as if it's almost too good for how little there is for Cool Kid within DBF's lore. The lyrics work as both a warning to the survivors, and could be something even more that they could work into, such as like a longing for connection or companionship. But I see this game hasn't really played into that from any way at all with Cool Kid's lore, outside of a brief excerpt which I've already said looks like it was written by an 8-year-old. John Doe's chase theme with Jane Doe, Entanglement, might be one of my favorite tracks in any asym game that I've recently heard. It's so chock full of this melancholy and sadness and empathy that's so unique among asym games currently, and it really adds to the literal horror that these two characters are experiencing in that moment. This just goes to show how much these games can be raised to greater heights when you have reverence for their lore and take them seriously, even if they are just a bunch of silly little Roblox people. This is when we get to the other chase themes in the game that aren't these ones, which are good and serve their purpose and are fine to listen to, but I don't like them nearly as much, and they don't do as much for me in the game as I feel they could otherwise. The regular chase theme for John Doe is good and serves well as an actual chase theme, as well as sounding like a battle theme for him, but I don't know, I just have trouble remembering it, you know what I mean? I think Entanglement just works really well as a regular chase theme for John, at least from his perspective. Imagine if the survivors heard this brutal, relentless monster, but all John feels is that sadness and being unable to stop himself from ripping these people apart, and that becomes especially apparent against Jane Doe. Captain Rampage's song is just a really hard, aggressive, metal rock sort of song, which to me is a massively missed opportunity. Lei Hang has an incredibly unique music theme, in both the scope of Canto 8's overall music, as well as just Limbus in general so far. I won't say much else, as Rampage doesn't seem to have lore or an identity outside of being a Lei Hang XP. However, even with Rampage's actions in Doom by Fate, he doesn't really strike me as a particularly evil guy. He seems to be doing what he's doing a lot more for fun rather than some form of sadistic pleasure or actually enjoying killing people. He seems like he just enjoys fighting way more. Hopefully this doesn't come off as condescending, but I would hope that a game that specifically calls out Limbus as an inspiration and then goes as far as to make an OC for the sole purpose of referencing a Limbus character would at least go as far as to capture the spirit of the character in his theme as well. Now, speaking of sadistic pleasure, Jeffrey Woods. Jeff's actual chase theme also leans into that metal intensity as well, with only a little bit of the traditional horror sharpness through pianos and such that a lot of people are accustomed to with Jeff the Killer. Again, this isn't necessarily bad, I just wish it was more unique. I can't help but wish that it leaned more into that vibe that his Lair 3 brought with the thumping drums and piano. While I am critical of these three major chase themes, to me it's less a lot about not thinking they fit, but again, I just want this game to have an identity, you know? I want these characters to have strong identities that separate them from one another, and I want this game itself to have a strong identity. These themes feel almost interchangeable with one another at times. They fit the bombastic and action-oriented nature of the game, but still, I can't help but want more, especially since I know these developers are more than capable of it. So my point is, this game has a big issue, I think at least, in that it needs to work out its identity, both gameplay-wise, lore-wise, and even music-wise. Not to mention, I seriously can't tell how seriously this game wants to be taken, and it should probably decide pretty soon. Some of these tracks read to me like it wants to be taken super seriously, and then I look at the lobby for this game, or the 8-year-old lore writings, and how little characters have any form of unique identity. With that out of the way, all that's really left now is to talk more in-depth about these things, so we'll start with the roster. The game currently has 5 survivors and 4 killers. That's actually a pretty sizable amount for a fairly new game, at least in the killer department, and yet for some reason, there's actually no explanation of what any of their abilities do in-game, which is terrible. Like, genuinely terrible. You have no idea how frustrating it is to me that a lot of games think it's okay to do this. It's not okay to do this. You shouldn't release your game without an easy way for people to read what a character does without needing to go to your unofficial fandom wiki. You should be able to have that information in the game when the game is ready to be released publicly. Moving on, the actual game itself plays like how you'd expect these games to play. Manage your stamina, try to keep as much distance as you can, and not die. So let's just go over each survivor first. Bacon is our first survivor. Nathan Bacon here is probably one of the worst designed survivors I've ever played in any asym ever, really. For starters, he's framed as a survivalist-style survivor. Despite this, he has no means of actually, surviving. He's got 3 abilities. First one we'll talk about is Pizza. It's a self-heal. Not much to say other than that, other than it's a pretty underwhelming self-heal. 20 HP on a 40-second cooldown is pretty bad. Most killers in this game do 25 to 30 damage per M1, and their abilities are about the same, if not even more. 20 HP will help you avoid some thresholds, maybe, but John Doe will still 4-shot you with his M1s, for example. Next is Tracker, which is a reference to the games like The Rake, which tells you how close the executioner is and highlights them on the map. This ability honestly serves no real practical purpose other than just staying away from the killer as much as possible, and it's a lot better to just use your eyes and have basic awareness, especially with how fast this game moves. I mean, killers have a terror radius for a reason. You don't need to use this unless you hear the terror radius, really. The only usage I can really see for it is, like, Jeff in stealth mode, maybe. Finally, we have the flashlight. The way the flashlight works is that you use it and then it blinds and slows the killer. However, they can still move and attack. There's nothing actually stopping a killer from just walking forward and attacking you through the flashlight, especially with how ridiculously big hitboxes are in this game, and how many killers have moves that just lunge them forward. Not only does it have a hefty wind-up animation and put-away animation, it's also just horribly inconsistent, especially when injured. It's really just not a reliable mid-chase option. The most actual, practical use case of the flashlight is when you pair yourself with another survivor actually capable of stunning the killer, or baiting a killer into chasing you instead. The first is actually pretty strong on paper, but you're probably more helpful to your team and yourself in the long term by playing as literally any other survivor. The latter is a really bad idea unless you have faith that someone will come and help you, or you simply don't mind dying for the other person. Of course, the killer could also just ignore you, too. Now, while Bacon's flashlight is really his only worthwhile ability, it's also limited. It has both a cooldown as well as a limited battery that can be filled through generators. Once all generators are done, tough luck, buddy. I shouldn't have to tell you why this makes him a lot weaker than he would be otherwise, and flashlight is already a weak ability, I would say. I wouldn't say it's so much that it's strong, it's just actually usable compared to everything else in his kit. So overall, Bacon fails pretty spectacularly at being anything close to usable in this game. A survivalist who falls apart entirely in a chase, and exists in a game where stealth is really only viable against one of the killers in the entire game. Even when not in the chase, none of his abilities are really all that good, and the only thing he brings to a team is a close-range slow and blind which could very easily get him killed. The best thing for you to do when playing Doom by Fate is genuinely just get as much money as you can as soon as you can, and buy literally any other survivor first. You'll do more for your team than Bacon's flashlight, and you'll have way more self-preservation as well. It honestly makes me pretty sad too. I like the idea of the Bacon hair being in these games as a survivor, and he's one of the most iconic parts of Roblox. Once a game finally does give him the respect and spotlight he deserves, he's utterly garbage, and it's annoying. Not to mention, it doesn't exactly fill me with confidence when a game releases a survivor that's this clearly bad. Brawler is up next, and I have a lot less to say about him. He's got Pocket Sand, which is a use twice ability. First is queuing up the ability, second is using it. It's basically a weaker stun that also seems like a parry from my experience if the killer hits you during it. I don't know, it's weird. Next is just a punch ability called Liver Blow. You punch, it stuns. He's absolutely better than Bacon at least. However, I personally can't help but feel he's generally outperformed by a survivor we'll cover later. Jester's up next. His first ability places down a hat that slows the killer when near it, playing Kai Cenat Baby Funk. Alright, next ability has him place down a banana peel to make the killer slip. Press it again while you're casting, and it's apparently a parry. I'd love to read about that in the game itself without checking the wiki to learn that, but whatever. Finally is a ranged debuff sort of ability where you throw a pie that disrupts the killer if it hits. Despite his longer cooldowns, he's probably actually pretty good in a coordinated team of strong survivors. His ability to shut down certain paths with bananas or distract with his hat, and then the ability to punish even further with pie, he actually seems pretty potent, especially at protecting himself as well with the parry. And because the parry is tied to the banana casting animation, and it's like part of it, it only makes it even easier to land as it forces the killer to make a guess if you're going to use a banana or use the parry. Jane Doe. She's a healer because of course she is. She's never allowed to be anything else other than that. In all seriousness, Jane is just a better survivalist than Bacon while also having far more team support. She has a pretty consistent knockback ability that comes out pretty fast and slows a killer, and then she can heal people, and then she has a stronger self-heal than Bacon. I've had very little trouble dealing with Bacon's, but I've actually had to try against the Jane Does I've encountered due to how fast her knockback ability can come out. If a brawler or soldier is ready for it, maybe they could also follow up on her knockback ability in slow. It definitely wouldn't be as easy as Bacon's flashlight, but I think also just having a survivor capable of doing this and healing both herself and others outweighs all of Bacon's usability. Finally, we have Soldier. He's got a passive that makes him never limp, which is actually pretty neat. He's then got the ability to carry other survivors. I'm not sure how you could ever make practical use of this without coordinating around it in a Discord call or something. I'd say it's actually pretty potent due to his ability to move other survivors while also allowing them to regenerate stamina, then put them down and stuff to reset the chase, but again, lots of coordination I wouldn't expect to see in a public game. He then also has a block ability, which does not work how you think it works if you've played one of these asym games before. This block has 0 cooldown if successful, and then a 7-second cooldown if failed. The third successful block you land is a guaranteed stun on the killer with heavy knockback, and then it puts the block on cooldown for 35 seconds. This is actually a pretty complicated block ability, but I like it conceptually. I just wish I could read about it in the actual game instead of having to go to an external wiki, I'm going to mention that almost every time. It's so annoying. What makes this block so strong is that most of the M1s in this game are very large in their hitbox, they have loud sound cues, and they have noticeable startup. This block just genuinely isn't as hard to land as other blocks or counters in these types of games. The last ability he has is a stun that has some pretty big range and also applies slowness after the fact. So he's got a pretty reliable and strong block ability, he's got a pretty long range, easy to land stun, and theoretically can really just bail someone out of a chase on low stamina if he has high stamina. So if you're near him trying to bait out his block, he can punish you with a stun. Did I mention he also has a bonus 15 HP? The balance of survivors is pretty weird right now, I'd say. Soldier and Jester are probably the two strongest survivors, especially Soldier. Jane is mainly only good for her ability to heal, I would say, and then the knockback is okay. Brawler is fine, but he's probably just pretty envious of Soldier. And Bacon is just terrible, like don't play him if you can. Next up, we have Killers. I'm going to be pretty blunt and say that I've had no trouble really winning in this game as Killer, and I've yet to really drop a game. I can't tell if the overall player base's skill level in Doom by Fate is just that low, or if Killer is really just that easy to win with. Cool Kid is your starter killer. His main deal is just being an aggressive chase killer, with a heavy emphasis on punishing abilities. Cool Kid has a whopping 4 abilities. His first is Binding Slash, which deals 10 damage and slows down survivors tremendously, primarily meant to confirm into different attacks. That's where Lunatic Strike comes in, with a long windup and 45 damage dealt. He then has an attack that fires 2 projectiles for a total of 30 damage, and an ability that gives him a speed boost for 3 seconds and reveals the location of the nearest survivor to him. Your main goal is just going to be run survivors down, hit them once or twice, and then if you can, use Binding Slash and Lunatic Strike to deal a whopping 55 damage. Honestly, you could just slap people to death as his killer, he's ridiculously easy. He seems really good. I'm not quite sure what you're meant to do on one that just keeps swinging against you, and he's got what's essentially a free chase win on a 50-second cooldown with his speed boost or so. There's also a Sancho skin. This is a Limbus Company skin I don't like. That's right, you thought the gas harpoon section of my last video was over? No! This section will have spoilers for all of Limbus Company Kanto 7, as well as Intervalo 7-1. Yes, I'm actually doing this. Where Limbus Company skins are, I follow, to nitpick to the ends of the earth. The second Kindred skin is a skin that turns Cool Kid into, again, last chance to avoid spoilers, Sancho from Limbus Company. What you need to know is that Sancho is the true personality of Don Quixote, suppressed and forcibly reawakened during the events of Kanto 7. I don't want to spend too much time here, but just know I could really just gush to you about Limbus Company lore, just like I did with Gas Harpoon almost. What I do need to say is that Sancho is a good person who does not want to needlessly kill people for no reason, nor does she fulfill any sort of conventionally villainous role in any particular way. This is really only emphasized after Kanto 7, when Sancho's memories are finally unsuppressed and present within our beloved Donkey. There are moments where you can briefly see the cold and serious Sancho underneath Don Quixote, but that's just because Sancho is Don Quixote and vice versa. Sancho's cold exterior isn't because she's evil or a bad person or likes hurting people or anything like that. She's just, you know, traumatized, depressed, and pretty socially inept. She's never really had any good social skills or awareness in all of her years being alive. However, there is also the Manager of La Mancha Land ID, which is Sancho if she didn't subscribe to Papa Quixote's dream of peace with humanity. This Sancho hates humanity. She especially hates Bari for poisoning her father's mind with these foolish, impossible dreams. All of this to say, making the Cool Kid skin based on actual good Sancho instead of the Manager bad ending Sancho is a pretty big blunder as someone who cares a lot about these characters, and I'd assume as someone who bases so much of their game on Limbus Company, you probably care as much, right? What's weirder is that the second Kindred skin outright references the pose that Sancho makes in her bad ending ID, in which she's piercing her father's chest. Yet, it's regular Sancho. So basically just give the second Kindred skin long hair. It's that simple. The only concern is that there's a big, unspoken element of characterization in Sancho's boss fight in Kanto 7, which much of the animations are based on. Sancho is torn between two sides in Kanto 7 once she reawakens, and ultimately fights the sinners because of it. Sancho's unique hard blood arts are very clearly inspired by Bari. At this point in the story, good Sancho is saying she's giving up on the dream and humanity, yet she cannot leave behind what she's learned from them, what she loves about them. The only way this is an issue to Doom by Fate is the bow and arrow animation the second Kindred skin has, because like much of Sancho's arts, it's based on Bari. Manager Sancho exclusively uses Don Quixote arts for this reason, as she cares not for humanity. That being said, I'd really be able to forgive a Manager Sancho using a bow and arrow, but you could also maybe do something with the parasol or having her do a generic hard-blood attack. The last thing we need to criticize is the music choice. The second Kindred skin has no actual chase theme nor terror radius outside of a subtle heartbeat. This means the skin, until then, is outright advantaged compared to the regular Cool Kid that does have a very loud terror radius. Then you have the Last Man Standing theme, and you have no idea how hard I rolled my eyes when I heard this song start to play. Not to mention the entire distinct genre and soundscape of Kanto 7. It's super distinct, and there's enough here to make entirely original songs based on that theme, or many different remixes of actually existing Limbus songs. I go over this in my Gas Harpoon section in my final Forsaken video, but the Millie song at the end of every Limbus canto is not for the character you're up against, but rather the focus center of the canto. This isn't any different here. Hero is about Sancho, her relationship with La Mancha Land's Don Quixote, as well as many other things that are relevant to her character. It's a song chock full of meaning for who Sancho is and who she's grown into being, which is why it's so baffling you'd ever use this song over our Sancho killing generally defenseless innocent people. Not only would she just never do this, but outright playing the song that's meant to symbolize her heroics and commitments to the impossible dream of peace with humanity is almost comedically insulting to her character. You're playing Hero over the exact opposite of what kind of person she wants to be. Basically, the skin is very frustrating. All you need to do to fix her is make her have long hair, and don't use Hero by Millie. I know people are going to ask, so just know I generally don't have any other major problems with the other Project Moon skins in the game, at least at the moment. Alright, moving on with killers again. Next up we have John Doe. First, he's immune to stuns. He only gets slowed down for the duration of the stun. His basic attack just deals 30 damage, and then he has a move that creates a wall of spikes. It deals a bit of damage in ragdolls, and before he fires he can leave a trail of stinky stuff on the floor. My favorite ability of his is Command Grab. He lunges backwards and then lunges forwards and grabs a survivor to throw them. This ability can be used to hit other survivors, which is pretty funny. It's a pretty good ability to use when you know a survivor is about to try something, which allows you to set up for a punish after the throw, or just be right on top of them when they get up. You then have Corrupted Force, which is just a running attack that picks up and carries a survivor. You can either go the full distance for slightly more damage at the cost of throwing them away, or collide with a wall for less damage but keeping them closer on average. The weirdest thing about John Doe is that he's the only killer with no form of location ability. I'm not sure why, either. It seems like a very weird balancing choice to give John Doe literally nothing for location, and then give Cool Kid a gigantic speed boost for 3 seconds and allow him to locate the nearest survivor all on the same ability. The balancing in this game is just very weird, and honestly, I would say that alone makes John Doe easily weaker than someone like Cool Kid or Jeff, if not outright the weakest killer in the game. Having no ability to locate survivors as conveniently as others means that stealth is also actually viable against him, which gives John Doe a significantly worse chances of properly lobby wiping than other killers. Not to mention, I'd just argue characters like Cool Kid or Jeff have just generally stronger sets of abilities. Even with John being likely the overall weakest killer in the game when it comes to fully lobby wiping, he's still ridiculously easy to win with, and he's feared by a lot of players for a reason. If this is what the weakest killer in the game looks like, what does that say about every other killer? Now we have my buddy boy Jeff. First, I like his model a lot, he looks neat. Second, he's kinda just weird. He does more damage from behind in most of his attacks, and due to Roblox latency and the natural jank that plagues every game on the engine, he'll probably end up hitting you from behind even when you're facing him. He has an ability that allows him to go invisible, and then just kind of reappears whenever he wants. This lets you get pretty free hits, especially on people doing generators, as well as completely shut down loops or chases as well. It's ridiculously strong, really. Then he's got a really silly dash attack, and then he has his Rage mode, which empowers him and his abilities for 20 seconds. When he's in Rage, yeah, he's pretty strong, to say the least. Similar to Cool Kid, if the Jeff has a basic level of competency, I'm really not sure what we're meant to do against him in the first place. His Rage mode boost is especially powerful. He's now just faster, and all of his abilities are enhanced. There's really not much you can meaningfully do once he's chasing you down in this state. Finally, we have Captain Rampage. Captain Rampage revolves around the Shark Mark rounds gimmick he borrows from Lei Hang. All of his abilities, including his basic attack, consume or require ammo. In the case of his base attack, he does more damage and has more range when it has ammo. Shatter Slash is a use twice move that's meant to hit someone and ragdoll them, then follow up with a heavier attack. His final offensive ability is Tidal Cleaver, which is just a big attack with a really big windup that takes 3 ammo. His final general ability is Reload, which just restores all his ammo and reveals every survivor's location. Rampage has 2 big problems. First, his pressure and offense is throttled by his ammunition gimmick. Second, all of his abilities are pretty harshly telegraphed, with Tidal Cleaver being conceptually cool, but being beaten out by holding Shift and W. That being said, he's still a killer in this game, so if a competent enough player is piloting him, you'll probably still die anyways, unless your team has perfect coordination or something. Once he gets close to you and has ammo, you'll have to really hope that this player is just incapable of adapting to juking patterns. It's kind of a bummer that the only mechanic they copied over from Lei Hang was just reloading. No Prey Mark, no Inner Strength, no Unrelenting Spirit. There's not even Savage Tiger Mark rounds either. As the name implies, these are just stronger and more savage versions of the regular Tiger Marks, and they're kind of what people know him for. It feels like a pretty missed opportunity to not give him 1 or 2 magazines of Savage Tiger Mark rounds to make him even more deadly. Really, while he's a cool killer, and it's cool to have one so clearly based on Lei Hang, I think he could probably serve to do a little teensy bit more, because as he stands, he's kind of just boring. And again, this is still a killer in Doom by Fate. If the killer is any half decent, your lobby will probably get messed up pretty fast. Something I hope a lot of you noticed about these killers is that a lot of them are largely just the same playstyle. Cool Kid is an aggressive rushdown killer. John Doe is an aggressive rushdown killer. Jeff the Killer, while he does have stealth functionality, is largely a rushdown killer. Captain Rampage is a rushdown killer who wants to overwhelm them as much as possible before having to reload. The killers in this game aren't very distinct from one another and largely populate the same niche. And because of that, I'd say you're already starting as one of the best killers in the game with Cool Kid. I'd argue Jeff is probably slightly better than Cool Kid for several different reasons, but Cool Kid is still a ridiculously easy killer to win with regardless. And that's how I felt about this game a lot of the time. It's really, really easy to win with Killer. But above all else, Killer in this game just really isn't that fun to me because I'm not really feeling challenged at all by the survivors in this game, and almost every killer's abilities feel more supplementary rather than necessary. I don't want to feel like what I'm doing is that easy at the same time, you know? I find it satisfying when I have to work even just a little bit for victories. Let's move on to maps.
Just go like...
This game only has about 5 maps in it. Firstly, I don't like the ship map. It's the map I've gotten to play the least while playing this game, and I don't really understand why it needs multiple floors, and I've never really enjoyed playing on it. The actual map itself is just looping the staircase. For some reason, the stairs don't have railings. I understand why from a gameplay perspective, but visually, it looks very off-putting. A lot of the map involves the killer running up the stairs, scaring survivors down, and then chasing from there, going back up and down the stairs. Library of Eternity is honestly pretty fine, probably the most fine map in the game, but it's also largely the same thing. Outside of the table in the center, there's really nothing to chain together or loop other than the staircase they have going to an elevated point and dropping down. Camp Lakewood is a ridiculously big map full of useless junk, and Neighborhood also has a bunch of very isolated loops of varying quality, and then also just has a lot of junk. Crossroads is interesting because it's very small, encouraging more proactive team fighting against the killer, but you can also gain a lot of distance through using elevated areas to knock killers down, buying yourself space and time. The biggest issue I have with a lot of these maps, though, is this weird feeling of like, what am I even supposed to do or try to chain together as Survivor? What do I loop? What do I really even do? What are the notable landmarks of these maps, and what is the intent behind the map from a gameplay perspective? Here's what I'll say about asym horror map design, because it isn't an exact science. These maps typically have landmarks and several key locations that are meant to be stronger for Survivor or stronger for certain types of killers, right? And then you have some minor notable things in between these major areas. In a game like Dead by Daylight, there's consistently the Killer Shack, which, despite the name, is a deceptively strong loop for survivors. Regardless of the map, there will generally always be a shack somewhere. Then, a Dead by Daylight map typically always has some sort of main building or main structure that the map is typically built around, known simply as main or main building. That area is usually pretty unique, especially among other maps in the game, and offers a variety of strategy for both killers and survivors alike. Outside of Shack and the main building, there's typically smaller loops of varying strength level, and as a survivor, it's important to chain those together and path efficiently. For a closer comparison, we can look at Brandon Works on Forsaken. We have 3 major landmarks, which is the castle, the big rock formation at the center, and the building yard. Between there's some wooden and plastic tile sets. The plastic tile sets are pretty straightforward, but have little cubbies you can duck into to break line of sight, whereas the wooden ones are a lot more maze-like, which lend themselves better towards mind games and looping. This is to say, a lot of Doom by Fate's map design is painfully simplistic and generic. Much of these maps feel like they were designed around no real cohesive idea at all and don't understand how looping actually works. For example, the library has a bunch of these tall bookcases, but they're not really structured in any way that allows for proper mind games, and it's generally always better for the killer to just brute force and run behind the survivor anyways. That's why the table in the center is so good. It's not like there's anywhere else on the map, and this way you can at least see when the killer is sprinting. With the drop down, you have a bit of room to juke or mind game the killer through breaking line of sight. Then there's really just tiny tables everywhere which really don't do anything. This is generally how every map kind of plays out. There's one, maybe two areas you're meant to use as a survivor, and that's it. There's also a lot of junk around the map, but that's all it is. Junk. It's really not all that helpful to you as a survivor. The junk problem on the map is also pretty bad when it comes to clarity. There's bumps on the floor you can't tell if you can walk over or not, and then there's small gaps in between structures that look like you can squeeze through, but can't. This just makes chases feel sloppier and more awkward, and if a survivor engages with a part of the map that defies expectations of both the survivor and killer, both just get annoyed and discombobulated for a moment, and it makes the overall gameplay experience feel worse. These maps are very boring, and they're not really playing into the strength of asym games or abilities at all. These maps are very gimmicky, and with the current balancing of the game, there's very little need for a killer to actually use their abilities to win a chase. And then you have killers like Cool Kid or Jeff in this game who can really just much more easily brute force any of the loops that do exist in the game by just using an ability or two. Not to counter the loop, as it's not even that strong in the first place, it's just to end the chase even faster. The other two killers can also just continuously run down a loop due to their natural speed and hitbox sizes and really have no actual need to use their abilities properly to win, and part of that falls on the design of the maps. Overall, the maps in this game are pretty boring. I think Crossroads is probably the coolest one both visually and gameplay-wise due to how unique it is, whereas Library is, again, probably just the most fine one. But I can't say I actually enjoy any of these maps like I do in other asymmetric games I've covered before. Now, let's try to be a bit more positive as we end off this video, because I do think Doom by Fate deserves at least an attempt from me to try and be more positive. I know it's a bit of a meme to say things like this, but this game absolutely has potential, and it's absolutely found a sizable audience that enjoys the game for what it is. To me, the biggest strength of this game is how currently fast it is, as well as just how action-oriented the overall presentation of everything is. The music is also really, really good. I criticized it pretty heavily earlier in this video, but still, much of the original soundtrack in this game is good. I just wish chase themes had more variety. John and Cool Kid are fine, it's more so Jeff and Rampage I wish had more to them. John Doe's Milestone Chase theme is also something I really, really enjoy and think is really good. So, I think to break it down easiest, let me just give you the most notable things I like and dislike about Doom by Fate in a list-like format. For things I like the emphasis on speed, action, and impact the game has. I think it's very reminiscent of a Battlegrounds game in terms of flair, and I think this gives the game a unique visual identity that it should likely lean into more. I like the music, with my only real issue being wanting more distinct chase themes. Speaking of, I want to give additional praise to John and Jane Doe's music. I'm a pretty big fan of the archetype or interpretations of Jane and John Doe, and they do an outstanding job with them. Now, things I don't like, and unfortunately there's a lot more here. Outside of its higher speeds, this game is pretty generic on almost all fronts. It's largely inoffensive for that reason too, but my emotions playing this game were very largely neutral, and I don't think I ever had, like, fun when playing it. I don't like the current survivor balancing. I think most of them are pretty weak in comparison to how strong killers are, and I think their balance is just all over the place. Bacon is, again, one of the worst designed survivors I've ever seen, to the point that it hurts my confidence a little bit in this game's ability to design things, if I'm being honest. Jester and Soldier seem pretty strong, Jane is the healer, and the Brawler, while he is an alright survivor, he feels like he's missing something. On that note, killers are just weird in this game. All four of them are generally the same archetype of killer, and they don't really have distinct game plans from one another. Even more than that, the killer baseline stats in this game are so extremely high, to the point that winning as killer has felt ridiculously easy and just not fun as other games. There's no friction or difficulty in what I'm doing as killer. I've said it before in this video, but I'd go as far as to say that many of the abilities killers have feel a lot more supplementary rather than necessary to their success, which is a far cry from the norm in asymmetrical horror games. Map design is also just lackluster and uninspired, and just boring to run around on. Now, as just one last little personal note from me, I'm not sure how relevant actually saying this is, but something that really bothers me about this game is the lack of originality. I don't necessarily mean about its actual gameplay, which is pretty generic outside of the unique elements of presentation, but that's at least serviceable. The gameplay, while generic, is fine. It's not my main issue. What I mean a lot more is that this game feels like it's trying to really fit hard into the mold of games that came before it, and feels outright reliant on its ability to reference other games and media. I think this is just a shame. For me, it's hard to get immersed in any sort of atmosphere or setting you might try and establish when I have the Keter battle theme remixed with, like, Oppa Gangnam Style as Honglu, Pequod Ishmael, and Yuji Itadori, and, like, dude, I love Project Moon. I'm not the type of person to try and gatekeep the things that I like, and I'm not the kind of person who gets annoyed at teenagers enjoying it on a surface level, but God, it really gets to a point where it's kind of just insufferable with how much you're doing it. And it's not just referencing Project Moon necessarily, it's just referencing, like, anything. All the while, you just neglect your own original creations. Just get an identity, dude. Brawler, Jester, and Soldier are all painfully generic, and they have no attempt to really give them any sort of distinct personalities. They don't even get actual names, and, like, why would I care about any of these characters? If I'm not supposed to care about them, then just let me play as my Roblox avatar, dude. This might not seem like an issue, but look at any other really popular asym game, and you'll see that they have original characters. They have a lot more dedicated, passionate fans, and people who love those original characters, that let them be more attached to the game they're from. And oftentimes, these OCs also have pretty distinct gameplay designs or identities, something that this game, Doomed by Fate, doesn't have. It's good to have these original things. It's an element of this game that is severely lacking. To put it in simple terms, what does this game actually have beyond hype moments and aura? This game, as far as I'm aware, doesn't even have an original killer plan for it. You have an SCP, a few Roblox characters, and then Slenderman. And guess what? I look at SCP-106's page, and I see that he has an ability where he dashes forward and runs really fast. Is he just going to be another killer that rushes you down and hits you and that's it? Closest thing this game actually has to an original character is Captain Rampage, and for a lot of reasons I'm struggling to even call him original. He exists solely for the purpose of referencing Lei Heng. That is the only reason. The official upload of his theme doesn't even use Captain Rampage's actual design. It uses his Lei Heng skin instead. To make it really just that much funnier on how much this game relies on references, it just goes to show that it's not a risk-free strategy to try and get popular, assuming that's an element of it. I ranted for several minutes about the portrayal of Sancho, who's one of my favorite characters in Limbus Company, and how she's been portrayed poorly in this game, and it really just makes me question if anyone on the team has ever actually played Limbus Company, which you don't want to be doing with your references, dude. When you portray something in a way that defies the expectations of fans, you really only serve to make things worse, rather than draw them in. And if you're really just hinging on like, oh, this game references the one thing I really like, so I'll play it, like, that's just... Overall, while I do recommend you give Doomed by Fate a try and formulate your own opinion, don't just parrot the YouTuber's opinion, this isn't a game I can personally see myself coming back to until, like, it has a lot of updates and it starts doing things a little differently. If you're familiar with me and my content, you should know that I want to like things. I want to be positive about them. While I do think Doomed by Fate has potential, much of its potential is just not being taken advantage of right now, and I'm not sure if it ever will at this rate. This game's reliance on being a reference machine and following the mold of games set before it and not trying to take any new, original ideas and present them to people really just frustrates me and kills a lot of the passion I could have about the game otherwise. If you like this video, be sure to like, subscribe, blah blah. If you want to give the game a shot, the link for it is in the description. It's like the first thing in it, alright? Take care.